Here I am.
All right. All right. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Very well. You're looking wild. I like your hair.
Thanks. Hey, it's almost your birthday, right? Your birthday is coming up in a week?
Yeah, that's right. Number 60.
It's a big one. You still look like a young whippersnapper.
Genetics and diet, perhaps.
Hey, I really like this. Hold on, I'm sharing this. Uh, can you
Yeah,
see that?
yeah, I can. That's the cover that Tara Hazelton painted.
That is so amazing. How much talent does she have? That's crazy.
Yeah, and she's doing wonderful out in Blaymore, Alberta, right near the border of British Columbia, and she's working at a marijuana store, and
Yeah.
she's doing gigs out there. She's going on hikes in nature, and she's always posting stuff on
Oh,
Facebook
I'm
and
so glad. I haven't
Instagram.
seen her in ages, but I do know that Tara Hazelton, when she was here, she was already one of our best singers, but then started acting. And who knew the camera would love her? She was really funny in that Foo Bar 2 movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So she's doing very well. So she did a great job on the artwork. So I'm
Yeah.
happy with that.
I count right now, I think there are 6 records available on Cornerstone of your records. I didn't see Grooveyard there, but a whole bunch of the other records are all there. Have you been counting? Is this like your 6th record for Cornerstone?
It's the sixth record for Cornerstone. Absolutely.
Wow. And what's it like working? I mean, this is Barry Elms and Mike Murley, so this is like a jazz label run by jazz people.
Yeah, it was started by Barry Elms, Al Henderson, and Mike Murley back, I don't know, in the
Early Time
early
Warp
90s.
days. Yeah.
That's right.
So nowadays, it must be a whole new world out there. I guess there isn't a plan. Like we're releasing the record. Of course, I'll play it on Jazz FM. But there's no gigs for a while, I guess. That's an obvious weird thing to come up.
Yeah, I'm taking. It's a weird thing. I mean, the CD was done as a project just to express myself, to document my work, obviously to attract presenters and that, so I can get gigs. But obviously, that's not going to happen for a while. But
Yeah.
it's a good time to practice, to write music. There's time to listen. There's time to read. There's time to do all sorts of things.
I
So
really like the new
uh,
record. The production seems a little bigger than some of the other ones. I mean, a solo record or a live trio, but then you've got guests like Mike Murley and uh, and Pat LaBarbera on your record.
yes, well, production, it was good engineering by Andre White, the great drummer, pianist, friend from Montreal, and he's engineered quite a few of my records, and he did a good job and engineering. And I thought, like the majority of the record is a quartet with
Hmm.
my regular quartet of Manu Tosaf, Red Schwager, and Morgan Childs, with whom we've played together for almost 9 years. So the majority of the record is with them, and I thought it would be fun to have some horns for 4 tracks of the 12 tracks. And Pat LaBarbera, I played with for many years with Al Henderson's quintet and sextet. Um, and Mike Murley, I've known personally for almost 40 years since he moved to Toronto, and I thought it would be nice to have him on board. And he and Pat have a relationship. Pat was once Mike's teacher, and now they're obviously peers. And
Yeah.
it's great for the listener to hear these two masters play.
Hey, I want to go back to the old days. You started off playing lots and lots of classical and U of T, right? You got your BA, but your first teacher that I noticed was in the U of T big band. You got to work back in the day with Phil Nimmons. That must have been awesome.
Yeah, this was in the early 80s. I originally went to university not as a music major. I was studying various liberal arts, so to speak, at Victoria College, and I was really denying myself my true essence. So through the help of by coincidence, I ran into a musician friend of mine, Doug Watson, who used to work at the station,
Oh, that's
and he
Clear. Yeah,
said, "Oh,
he's a great
yeah,"
guy.
he said, "Oh, the big band at U of T needs a piano player." So I started playing in the big band at U of T. Then I subsequently became a music major, and it was great to play in the big band led by Phil Nimmons. He's a great man, and he's still with us. In his late 90s,
96.
and Yeah, and he's a great man, a great inspiration, and obviously a great composer. And so he was more like the band leader, but he taught just by his presence. So
Right.
that was fun.
Yeah. Now, you're mentioning some of these other people you're playing with, and it's reminding me that most people, if they live in Toronto and they follow jazz, they probably know you've switched your acts. But I think a lot of people might be surprised you put out so many records with you as a pianist. And when did you move to bass? About 5 years ago?
Well, I haven't moved. I mean, I still play piano, and prior to like I must clarify that.
Mhm.
Prior to the lockdown, I played for about 11 years every Friday afternoon with the Hogtown Syncopators,
Yeah.
featuring Tara Hazelton and the great Drew Jureka, the violinist, sax player, singer, and I played piano as a sideman and recorded with the Cookers Quintet. We
Right.
did a couple
Great
of
band.
tours. So I was active. Perhaps I wasn't as visible as a band leader playing piano, but
Yeah.
I'm always playing piano. In fact, I'd be in the poorhouse if I didn't play piano. But
Right.
I added bass to my arsenal, so to speak, and I started playing bass 16 years ago. And I started going public with it close to 10 years ago because I wanted to reach a certain standard of professionalism before I made myself public. So I work hard on the bass, and it's a great instrument to play. I recommend it if you have some time on your hands, James. Buy yourself a bass and enjoy yourself.
Wow. I can feel the calluses already. I love that idea.
Yeah,
That's hilarious. Yeah, I'll
yeah,
just pick up a bass. I have room
yeah.
for it here. It would look great in my living room.
No, they're beautiful objects, and you got to work the thing. But it's a great way to
I was
it's
told it
all
has to touch you. The bass
yeah
should
it's
actually
yeah
be touching you, and you should be playing it as an extension of yourself. It shouldn't be over here.
yeah
Here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel the vibrations. It's a great way to. It's a creative instrument. The 90% of the time, unless one is taking a solo and playing the melody, it is a supporting role. But the supporting role is basically fundamental to the music, and it's a great way to witness and participate uh, in great music. You're locking in with the drummer. You're trying to play good notes that correspond with the chords played by the piano player or guitarist, and then you're in the background listening to these great horn players when they're playing, and it's a wonderful role to play, and it's very enjoyable, and
Who
it's
are some of
constantly
your
creative.
favorites? Who are some of your local favorites? People that you think have a real style.
Well, I mean, I could probably name 20 people. I don't want to leave anybody out, but
No,
some
I'm not
people.
saying your favorite. Just a few that come to mind. I'm letting you
Okay, okay, specific bass players we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's uh, Don Thompson. Obviously, he doesn't play much bass these days, but he was a great influence and a wonderful bass player. Great musicianship, great dexterity, great melodic sense. Could play in the high thumb position expertly. Neil Swainson is a great bassist and has had a great career justifiably. He's a great bass player. There's a few bass players exactly my generation. Pat Collins, Jim Vivian, Mike Downs,
Hmm.
and I mean, then we can go younger generations all the way down. There's at least a dozen or more excellent bass players, and probably about 30, 40 excellent bass players in Toronto. So it's a great town for bass players.
You worked for a while with Brandy Disterheft. She was my guest last week, and there's a woman whose career is just exploding.
That's great to hear, and of course, I played with her for many years here in Toronto. She was with my trio with the drummer Sly Uoff,
Hmm.
and since moving to the States, she's done very well for herself. And I actually saw her in Toronto right before the lockdown in March, so it was nice to see her back then. And I know she has a new record out, and she's playing with great players. So more
Hmm.
power to her.
Yeah, absolutely. And more power to you. Now, I just wanted to ask about some of the early influences when you were getting hooked, because you're studying classical and then you're getting hooked on jazz, like Art Pepper, Ed Bickert. There was a lot of these people you got to see live, right?
Yeah, live influences. Ed Bicker, just because of the sheer mastery of his playing, and it's as a pianist, I envy the what a guitarist like Ed Bicker can do, just playing maybe 3 or 4 notes. He can play a chord, and it's just huge, like the Berlin Philharmonic or something. It might not be loud, but in terms of the spiritual weight and the sound, it's incredible conception. I remember one of the first gigs I had with Ed Bickert. I hired him for some innocuous background wedding job or something like this, and I took a solo on a piece, there was a bass player, and then it was Ed's turn to play. And I mean, within the first phrase that he played, I just realized like he completely obliterated everything that I had played. It just seemed, in comparison, my playing just seemed weak and insignificant. Not because it was necessarily my playing was necessarily bad, but more that his playing was so great
So good.
and powerful and came from such a deep place. So he's a great inspiration, not only for guitarists but for all musicians who want to play, beautiful music.
Yeah. What were the clubs in the early days when you were studying that you would be hitting? Obviously, the Rex was already there, right?
The Rex kind of started a little later to have jazz. I've first heard jazz in Toronto at places like Bourbon Street, where they had local rhythm sections and visiting American guests. I remember hearing people like Pepper Adams, uh, Al Cohn, Zoot Sims. Those people were favorites. I saw Jim Hall there. I got to hear some great Toronto rhythm sections at the time. I enjoyed the matchup of Neil Swainson and Jerry Fuller. They were great. Obviously, I heard Bertie Chinesky many times in many different situations and was always amazed at his skill. And he's still a wonderful musician.
Archie Aline was probably back then, right?
Pardon me?
Archie Aline was sitting in a.
I heard Archie a few times, and I got to play with him subsequently many times, and he's a great player. And there was the clubs also on Front Street. There was East 85th and Front was the name of the club. I heard people there. In the later part of the 80s, there was the Bermuda Onion and the Colonnade on Bloor Street, and I heard people there.
That was a strange venue, wasn't it? Bermuda Onion, the entrance, it really didn't feel like you were going to a jazz club, but they had great music there.
Yeah, it was great, and just some smaller places that might have jazz for a very short period of time. So those are the places, and obviously at the time there was I heard jazz on the radio, CGRT, the predecessor of Jazz FM. I heard a lot of jazz and was exposed to jazz by the DJ Ted O'Reilly, who was exposed generations of musicians and listeners to great jazz of all eras. And there was at the time too people like Phil McKellar, who had jazz on his radio show.
Yeah.
And so that's how people of my generation got to hear jazz, those kind of clubs and on the radio as well.
Cool. Well, from then until now, I mean, there's no point in talking about the current state of jazz because we're going to hope that 2021 we start to open up and move on again. Obviously.
I certainly hope so too. I mean, we're just kind of like caged animals waiting to be released or something.
I know. Meanwhile, you've made a beautiful record. I'm playing a couple of tracks even tonight. I think it's just a fantastic record. Maybe one of your best. I still have a soft spot. You know, when you put out a record, I always find like 1 or 2 songs that I just kind of add to my playlist and live with. And this record, I can't find 1 or 2. I've listened to it several times now. And there's just a whole bunch of stuff I love. And so much of it is original. I know your friend Andre wrote one tune, but most of these are your songs, right?
Yeah, I think I wrote, I don't know, maybe 8 songs, and there's a piece by Andre and a piece by Amanda, and there's one standard. Well, it's a standard song. People don't do it that often. It's called Mangoes. It's a Rosemary Clooney tune that Sonny Rollins did in the 50s. And I'm happy with this. I've recorded original music in the past, but this is a record that has the most of my originals, and they're played by great players. So in some ways, this is my best record. I'm sad to say that it's better than my piano playing records, not because I'm playing bass, but just because of how everything fit together.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're a multi-instrumentalist. It's a real inspiration to musicians. I think that the lines you pick and the background you have, everything culminates into you playing bass in a way that would be different than if you didn't spend all those other years. So it comes together in a I would say a thick way. it glues, it gels together really nicely. So congratulations on a cool record.
Thank you, James.
All
Thank you,
right.
James. I appreciate that. Thanks for your support.
All right. And keep going through all this nonsense, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, James.
All
See you
right.
later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.